Good evening. It is now Thursday, the 3rd of November. It is 10:16 p.m. Gordon Causey coming live and talking to no one right now because no one's watching at this moment. I did a video a day or two back, and my thoughts were so disjointed and it was so rambling that I deleted it. I apologize for that. I won't be deleting this one. I don't intend to. What I wanted to talk about tonight was what I believe everyone should be focusing in right now. And it's hard in today's world because there are so many distractions going on. There are so many events. If you're living in Ontario, Canada, where I am, CUPE, which is the Canadian Union of Public Employees, is defying a piece of legislation put forward by Doug Ford's Conservative government, which has made strike action illegal, and they are defying that legislation and have called a strike. I'm editorializing. I don't know all the details, but what I do know is that a number of schools in Ontario, a number of school boards, including the one my youngest attends, the schools are going to be closed. And I was tempted to want to do a video talking about that, and I'll touch on it briefly. But to my mind, what we're witnessing right now in terms of Ford declaring strike action illegal, to do that, he has invoked a part of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms called the notwithstanding clause. And basically what that means is, notwithstanding the fact that this legislation is illegal, we're doing it anyway. Notwithstanding the fact that this violates the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, we're doing it anyway. And it's the same thing that Justin Trudeau did during the Ottawa protests. The protests were in Ottawa. The trucker convoy was perfectly legal. And so Trudeau had no legal way to combat it. He refused to meet with the protesters or anyone and discuss what was being protested. His move was simply to engage in propaganda, to frame it as an illegal occupation, which was horse hockey from the start, because there was nothing illegal and it wasn't an occupation because the protesters were on public grounds. You can't. Quite simply, there's a word called Schadenfreude. It's an English word taken from German, and it means the malicious enjoyment of another's misfortune. And to my mind, many education workers supported Trudeau's invocation of the Emergency Measures Act and the heavy hand that he used to quash people's constitutional and charter rights in Ottawa during that convoy protest. And so many of CUPE's members applauded Trudeau for stepping on people's constitutional and charter rights. Now, they don't like it. They don't like it when it's their rights being abrogated. Personally, I sided with, if I'm going to be consistent, I sided with the convoy protesters and the truckers, and I will side with the CUPE and its members, because our Constitution and our Charter of Rights and Freedoms is the highest law of the land. And it's sickening that we have governments, both in Ottawa and now in Ontario, that are wiping their rear ends with our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. But welcome to the world we're living in. But in a fashion, you can almost look upon that as a distraction. And you can perhaps say that it was orchestrated simply because the offer that the Ford government made to the teachers' unions, we're talking about, and these aren't, sorry, not the teachers' unions, but OPSU, or rather CUPE, there's so many unions, CUPE, Canadian Union of Public Employees, they represent cleaners, secretarial staff, support workers, not the actual teachers. The teachers have their own union. And so, and QP members are not particularly well paid. Some are making just $39,000 a year. And if you're living in a jurisdiction like Ottawa or Toronto or anywhere in the GTA, $39,000 a year is far from being a living wage. And I don't remember the exact offer, but it was like 1 or 2%. And with the rising cost of living brought on by governments borrowing and spending like it's the final days of the Roman Empire, I have a lot of empathy for the teacher, or for the QP members. But it's almost like they were forced. It was forced, and everyone's trying to play the victim card. The QP members, they're the victims of an overreaching government that is refusing to deal fairly with the government workers. And the government is playing the victim card by saying that these greedy unions are doing further damage to our children. Everyone's a victim. And it's almost like a professional wrestling match where both sides are trying to paint themselves as the face and the other side as the heel. Then there's this Pelosi situation in the U.S. where Nancy Pelosi's house was broken into or something, and police came in and found Nancy Pelosi's husband and some guy in his underwear and a hammer, and I don't know, I don't care. To me, that's an even bigger distraction. Or Elon Musk and his attire at a Halloween show and is taking over Twitter and all this distraction. What should we be paying attention to? Well, it's probably the thing that is getting the least coverage right now. And I'm talking about, there's a gentleman by the name of Dr. Geert Vanden Bossche, and he came onto my radar early in 2021. So a year and a half or more ago, back in March, April of 2021. And this is when the COVID vaccines were first seriously rolling out. They were authorized, emergency use authorization in the United States in December of 2020. In Canada, we referred to it as an interim authorization. But things didn't really start ramping up until early 2021, March, April. Canada, we were behind the curve. We had supply issues, oh darn. And it wasn't really until May, June that needles started to go into arms at a significant rate. And Dr. Geert Vanden Bossche was ahead of the curve, March, April, talking about, he called on the World Health Organization and world health bodies to halt mass vaccination campaigns because of, and I'm going to explain it as best I can. I've linked below his own website. This is Dr. Vanden Bosche's own website. I've linked what he's written down below, but I'm going to try and synthesize it a bit so that perhaps it'll be a little easier to understand for a lay person, which is what I am. Although, I have taken some university level science courses, but I'm not accredited or anything. I just think I have a decent capacity to synthesize this information. You can decide for yourself whether or not I do a decent job or not. But before I get going on that, who is Dr. Geert Vanden Bossche? There are countless experts out there. We all know the names. There's Dr. Robert Malone. There's Dr. Michael Yeadon. There's Dr. Peter Jacobson, I believe. No, Peter Jacobson. Peter McCulloch, the most published cardiologist in world history, as far as I know, certainly the most published cardiologist in American history, and the editor of at least 2 peer-reviewed scientific publications. He's had his medical licenses and his accreditations removed. It's the price you pay when you go off script, when you defy the narrative. And so I wonder, who is this Dr. Geert Vanden Bossche? And I'm going to share with you, I'm going to read, pardon my reading. but I'm going to read to you from a um, this is his biography. He was speaking at a conference, and I'm sorry for my computer being slow, but it's from the Allied Academics 21st World Congress and Exhibition on Vaccines, Vaccination, and Immunization. And this was held in November of 2017 in Vienna, Austria. And this is the bio they provided on Dr. Vanden Bossche. Geert Vanden Bossche obtained his DVM, Doctor of Veterinary Medicine, at the Veterinary Faculty of Ghent, and his PhD in virology at the University of Hohenheim, Stuttgart. Following his postdoctoral training in virology, immunology, and molecular biology at the Free University of Berlin and the University of Hohenheim, Germany, he was given the Vienna Legende and subsequently held adjunct faculty appointments at the University of Hohenheim, Germany, the University of Leuven, Belgium, and the European Faculty for Environmental Sanitation at the University of Ghent in Belgium. He then transitioned to the vaccine industry to serve various senior roles in both early and late vaccine development with companies such as GSK, Novartis, and Solvay. In 2008, he joined the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in Seattle to serve as Senior Program Officer in Vaccine Discovery for Global Health. Furthermore, he also founded Univac LLC, a startup vaccine company, and coordinated the Ebola vaccine program on behalf of Gavi. Gavi is the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunizations. He is now the head of Vaccine Development Office at the German Center for I'll read that again. He is now the head of Vaccine Development Office at the German Center for Infection Research, DZIF, in Germany. He is board certified in virology and microbiology, the author of over 30 publications, and inventor of on a patent application for universal vaccines. He has presented vaccine and adjuvant-related topics at multiple international congresses. So that's somewhat a long bio from back in 2017 before COVID came along. And then when COVID came along, he started talking about immune escape. And this is my understanding of what he said. He said, and again, March, April 2021, that conducting a mass vaccination campaign while a virus like SARS-CoV-2 is spreading widely among the population, that it would put evolutionary pressure on the virus itself, and that the virus would mutate and learn to evade the antibodies that are generated by the vaccines. I hear him in his interviews and in his writings and in his videos. He talks about there's the innate natural immune response, and then there's the vaccine generated immune response. There are antibodies produced by your natural immune system, and there are antibodies that are produced as the result of a vaccine. So there's vaccine-induced antibodies and natural antibodies. And he contends that when you get vaccinated, that these vaccine-generated antibodies then outcompete your natural innate immune response, the antibodies you would produce naturally. And he said that by mass vaccinating everyone, it was huge, 80, 90% of the population, 60, 70, 80, 90, depending where you are. In Canada, we're at 90% of the 12 and up population who have had at least 2 doses. And we're at 80% of the entire population that have had at least the primary first 2 doses. And he said that doing that would lead to this evolutionary pressure being put on the virus, and that we would see mutations that would defeat vaccine-generated immunity, and that we would have a variant would emerge that would spread, be far more transmissible than the original, that things would be even worse. And what did we see? Omicron. It was exactly what he predicted. And at the same time, when he came out with this theory, he was taken to task. And McGill University in my native Canada, McGill is perhaps, it's certainly one of the most highly regarded medical schools in Canada, and maybe the most recognized and highest rated medical school in Canada. They put out a paper on their site on mcgill.ca, Office for Science and Society, separating sense from nonsense. And it said the doomsday prophecy of Dr. Geert Vanden Bossche. And the fortunate thing in this, at least they didn't engage in what's typically referred to as an ad hominem attack, where they, rather than attacking what he's saying, they attack his credentials. They acknowledge that Dr. Vanden Bossche is an expert on viruses, on on immunology, on virology, on vaccinology. He's one of the world's leading vaccine experts, and they at least didn't try to diminish him in that regard. And they wrote, the COVID-19 pandemic has attracted a swarm of vocal contrarians like little else in the recent past. These public commentators, often bedazzled with advanced degrees, have painted themselves as brave mavericks escaping from the mainstream herd to denounce the cataclysmic consequences of public health measures. The latest example of this phenomenon comes in the form of Dr. Geert Vanden Bossche, who recently published an alarming manifesto. In it, Dr. Bossche makes a number of incorrect or exaggerated claims about the use of mass vaccination during a pandemic, and urges international health authorities to stop the current crop of COVID-19 vaccines, or else risk unleashing a global catastrophe without equal. This is scary stuff, but it is also quite misguided, at least according, McGill didn't foresee an Omicron. They were not predicting an Omicron like Dr. Vanden Bossche was. And I'll invite you can search that out for yourself. It's on McGill's own website, The Doomsday Prophecy of Dr. Geert Vanden Bossche. But the simple fact of the matter is, I wanted to touch on something, and my brain, someone will tell me I had COVID, and it's long COVID, and it's affecting my mental capacities. Anyway, had something to do with immune escape. This idea that initially we were told that breakthrough infections were going to be incredibly rare. That's what people like this article in McGill put forward. Dr. Vanden Bossche was saying that immune escape would become the norm. And I think everyone now knows dozens of people fully jabbed, some often boosted 2, 3, 4 times, or 2 or 3 times. I think we're on shot 5 now. Who have gotten horribly sick with COVID. I mentioned in a recent video, I was just talking to the guy yesterday. He finally feels, he said it was the worst. It's his 3rd COVID infection. And as it turns out, he's had 2 boosters. And I imagine he's going to get the bivalent booster as well once the time frame becomes available. And he says that this most recent infection he had with COVID was the worst, that he was sick for nearly 2 weeks and that he only just recovered his sense of smell and taste. And now I have another young family member who is very, very sick. As a matter of fact, they took him into hospital to get looked at. That's how sick he is. And sadly, these are just all too common. And I'm going to invite you to read, because given that Dr. Vanden Bossche was right about immune escape and the emergence of Omicron, he's further contending now that we're merely, by all these boosters and this bivalent, that it's going to exacerbate the situation and make things even worse. He's put out an article, the one that I've linked below, and it says it is 12:05, meaning it's after midnight, it's too late, there's no going back now. All we can hope to do now is to deal with the damage that has been caused, because you can't unjab someone. Once you've been vaxxed, and I would love to talk to this gentleman, but he's in far more demand, I'm sure, than he's not going to deal with me, and that's fine. But this is what we should be focusing on: the absolute criminal. I don't think there's any kind way to put it. The absolute criminal misuse of science to herd the human population, as it were, toward what's looking like a health disaster. As we come into the colder winter months, this is when viruses spread. I've spoken about it in previous videos. Why do viruses spread more in the winter? There are a number of reasons that are postulated. Number one, obviously, we're spending more time indoors. So we're around more strange people for longer periods of time. So that's one reason. Hello, Amina. Amina says, hi, Gordon. Hope you're good. I'm doing all right. I'm doing okay. So one reason is we're indoors more. Another reason is, and I think this is a major part of the reason, is because in the winter months, the air becomes less humid. We all complain about the dry air, about our itchy skin. And so that dry air does a few things. Number one, it dries out our nasal and respiratory passages and leaves less defense systems there, that mucus and snot and crap that lines our nasal and respiratory passages. That serves as a barrier, as a defense against viral pathogens. That's what I've read. Another thing that happens is in the dry, less humid air, viral aerosols can linger in the air for long, long periods of time, hours and maybe even days. When the air is moist and humid, like we get in the summer and spring months, the moisture in the air actually attaches itself to viral aerosols, causing them to fall to the ground very quickly. But when the air is dry, they float. And so when we go into grocery stores, shopping malls, sporting venues, schools, any large congregant setting, we're swimming in an ocean of aerosols, and the aerosols are hanging in the air. In the summer months, when the air is more humid and moist, those aerosols fall to the ground because they attract moisture. So we're entering that time of year when, and then there are other reasons. If you live in the northern hemisphere, like in Canada, the United States, there's less sunlight. The days are getting shorter. We're going to, from now until December 21st or so, every day we'll have less and less and less and less sunlight in it. And sunlight is needed to help your body generate vitamin D, which is vital to a healthy immune system. So, I mean, it's basically the wintertime is a perfect storm for viruses to be passed around. I did want to mention one thing. There's an interview that Dr. Vanden Bossche did last year after Omicron had emerged, and it's still available on YouTube, because how can you censor a guy on YouTube for having been right? He had predicted an Omicron type variant. He didn't name it Omicron. He didn't know what they were going to call it. He just predicted we're going to have a variant that's going to emerge, that's going to spread like wildfire, be even more transmissible than what we saw previously. And he nailed it. And in that video, the interviewer asked him to comment on cases of myocarditis, pericarditis, on sudden adult death syndrome, and other severe adverse events that are being talked about. And he stayed away from it because he said that one of the biggest problems in this whole pandemic during this whole 2-year, 3-year period has been that people don't stay in their lanes. And he doesn't have the requisite expertise in fields like cardiology to talk about heart health. So he leaves it alone. His expertise is in things like vaccinology and immunology. So he stays focused on that in which he is qualified as an expert. I think in this country, we have Dr. Justin Trudeau, who thinks he knows how to differentiate. With his liberal arts degree, he thinks he knows what represents scientific truth and scientific fiction. Heck, look, even McGill got it wrong. Canada's most prestigious medical school said that Dr. Vanden Bossche was talking out of his rear end. He didn't know what he was talking about. Well, we're going to see an Omicron type variant emerge. Bingo presto. And so now, what's he predicting going forward? Well, we're already seeing it with the emergence of XBB, and I can't name all the variants they're coming out with now. And what Dr. Vanden Bossche is saying is that one or more of these variants is going to be beyond scary. And my hope, my prayer, and again, I'd love to ask this gentleman this question, is that as an unjabbed person who, because Dr. Vanden Bossche talks very highly of a person's innate immune system, of our own natural immune system, unaided by vaccines, how strong and robust it is. My question would be as to whether the unjabbed, if regardless of the fact that we're unjabbed and our immune system has not been suppressed by vaccine-generated antibodies that are suppressing our body's ability to produce its own antibodies, will that be enough? Because it's a scary notion. I mean, right now, 80% of the Canadian population has been jabbed at least twice, and they're pushing hard on these bivalents, which Dr. Vanden Bossche is contending will make things even worse. And the people who are saying to push the bivalent, the same people pushing the bivalent boosters are the same people who said that guys like Dr. Vanden Bossche, talking about an Omicron type variant, that they were crazy. And for what it's worth, Dr. Vanden Bossche isn't the only one who was putting this out there. Another was Dr. Luc Montagnier, who is a French, or rather was, he has since passed away. He was 89, I think, years of age. Anyway, he passed away, but before he passed away, and again in March, April, at the same time as Dr. Vanden Bossche, Dr. Montagnier was talking about immune escape and antibody dependency enhancement and the suppression of people's own innate immune system. Dr. Montagnier was talking about the emergence of autoimmune diseases in the years to come. And I think there's a tendency, humanity, we have such a short time frame. We look and people got jabbed, and a month later, 2 months later, 6 months later, they're fine. And so, well, that's long term in people's views. Simple fact of the matter is that when they do a long-term safety study in pharmacology, long-term is regarded as bare minimum 2 years. And we're only now just coming up to the 2-year point when the very first people who took part in Pfizer and Moderna's trial, they're only now just coming up to that 2-year window, only just now. Neither one of those companies has published the results of a phase 1 safety study because they didn't do a single phase 1 safety study. So there's nothing to publish. And anyway, as always, we'll see what happens when the colder weather gets here. And as everyone keeps taking their boosters. And I know it's not, but people would prefer the distractions are nicer. The distractions are nicer than this topic, talking about Nancy Pelosi and that salacious little story of her husband. Was this a case of homoeroticism gone wrong? Who knows? Who cares? Or this situation that's happening in Ontario with the teachers and the Canadian Union of Public Employees. Should focus on that, or the war in Ukraine, or goodness knows what else, or the World Series. So many things we can fixate our attention on, and a lot of people don't want to talk about what I'm talking about, and I get that. That's cool. So we just won't talk. Anyway, thank you for watching. God bless. If you want to I'm human. I like the likes. It gives me that little endorphin, or that little whatever it is, dopamine rush, whatever, that little chemical that gets released in the brain. Yeah, it happens to me. And if you want to subscribe, I can't believe it, I'm up to 58, 59 subscribers. It means there's a lot of bored people out there. So see you again in a couple more nights. Maybe a week or so. Dr. Kieran Moore, who's Ontario's Chief Medical Officer of Health, said that he will be poring over the data over the next 2 weeks. And at that point, he may make a recommendation that the Ford government that we reintroduce or mandate masks on everyone's faces in indoor public spaces again. I pray not. I don't want to get into the confrontations over them. I don't want to, I've shared before my Mingle mask, my stupid passive aggressive compliance. This flimsy piece of plastic sits like that. And I'll go back to wearing it if needs must. But I pray that when someone has the cojones to not wear a mask, I pray that if they're ever confronted, I pray I'm around, because this or these stupid things are horrible. I'll end it with that. I mean, the vaccines are worse, but these are bad. British Medical Journal study, peer-reviewed science. You want to increase your chance of a respiratory infection like SARS-CoV-2, like a coronavirus. Well, put one of these on for 4 more hours a day, and you have a 200% increased risk of developing a respiratory infection. Wear a cloth mask, and the risk goes up 1,300%. And now we've got Ontario's Chief Medical Officer of Health talking about reinstituting them in another 2 weeks. And like everyone, I'm tired of the fight. I'm not backing down, but I'm tired of the fight. I'm tired of fighting ignorance and stupidity. But if needs must, we'll just keep fighting on, because the Mensa dropouts, the double-digit IQ types love these. They love their cloth masks. They love their disease rags. It's an overt display of their virtue. And, the simple fact of the matter is, look at the Spanish flu. In the first year, there were no mask mandates. In the second year, they brought in mask mandates. And when did sickness and mortality go through the roof? In the second year, after the mask became mandated. And we've seen the same thing here. Infection rates have actually gone down from where they were in March prior to March of 2022 this year. Things got better when the masks were taken away. And I contend that if it weren't for the fact that so many people still insist on wearing them, that things would be even better if people could let go of their fear. But people fear becomes their security blanket. They don't want to let go of their fear. They become traumatized. And anyway, I've rambled. Good night. God bless. Like, subscribe. You know the same thing everyone else says. Thanks for watching, Amina.